When I first decided to make Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, it came about through kind of a quirky kind of deal where we were working with a company that was in the adult business called LA Video. And like most people in that industry, they wanted to become legitimate producers, and they had created a line called Camp Video. And we had sold them a picture called Nightmare House, and they had distributed that, and we were happy with them, and they were happy with us, and they wanted to get involved in a film that they could actually physically be a part of. And I pitched them two ideas. One was called Zombie Holocaust, which I don't remember what it was about at this point. And the other one was called Chainsaw Hookers. And they really liked that idea. They wanted to add the word Hollywood because they thought it sounded more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I told them I thought maybe I could get Gunnar Hansen, who was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, who I knew somewhat, to be in the film. And we agreed that this would be what we would make, and they were going to pay me a whopping $25,000 up front for the home video rights in the US for X amount of years, and then I would put up the rest of the money to make this show.
Before Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, I was doing a lot of movies like Creepazoids, movies like Night of the Demons, Return of the Living Dead, Silent Night, Deadly Night, and then all of a sudden, here came Fred Olen Ray, who I'd heard a lot about, and said, "What about Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers?" I said, "Now this isn't a porno, is it?" He said, "Oh no, it's not a porno." And I went down, talked to him, and got the part.
When we decided to make this picture, we didn't have hardly any money, as you know, and I was working on a picture called Moon and Scorpio, helping them with some pickups on this Gary Graver movie, and it needed like 4 days of shooting. And so I said, well, here's what we need to do. Since you can't really pay me for this, you'll give me this amount of money and you'll let me have the equipment on the days that you're not using it. And this was, they only needed it for 4 days, so I picked up the equipment early on Friday, and I had it Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday. Then I ran off to do Moon and Scorpio from Monday through Thursday. Then I had their equipment back again on Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the following weekend. And so I made this picture in about 5.5 days, and I used their offices as well, was part of the deal, and they became the offices of Jack Chandler, the private detective, and the police station, and those things were all shot at the offices of Transworld Entertainment over the corner of Wilcox and Sunset Boulevard. And in picking up the equipment early, I managed to squeeze in a Friday evening shoot. And if you watch the film, that is the footage where the girl goes to the house and the guy wants to take pictures of her for a calendar, and she hits him with a baseball bat and saws him up in the tub, Fox Harris scene, Fox being one of my favorite actors, who was great in Roger Corman's Forbidden World, and of course he was in a lot of the Alex Cox movies like Repo Man. He was the guy with driving the car around with the aliens in the trunk. So that's how this came about, and I think we must have spent about $50,000 to $58,000 to make this picture, 25 of which came from the home video people. And when it was done, they were so enthralled, the adult video people, that they actually rented the Egyptian Theater, and they had the premiere for the film at the Hollywood Egyptian Theater, which was quite a large theater at the time. And I went over there to see the premiere of my own movie, and it was almost like I didn't exist. I mean, it was like all of a sudden the filmmakers had become second-class citizens, and the guys who put up the lousy 25 grand were the kings of the hill. And there were people I had never seen before. Kit Natividad was there, and over in the corner was a guy dressed in a policeman's uniform, and he was signing autographs. And I said to somebody, I said, "Who is that guy? Who's that guy?" They said, "Well, that's Paul Marco, who played Kelton the Cop in Plan 9 from Outer Space." And I went, "Get out of here." And the next day, the LA Times actually ran an article about the premiere of the movie. And they noted the guy in the police uniform over in the corner signing autographs. And Kevin Thomas, I believe, said, and I'll never forget it, he said, "Celebrity comes easy in places like this."
At the time we had done Chainsaw Hookers, Linnea Quigley and I had gotten cast in several films together, so we were almost becoming a team in the films that we were doing. I had been doing a lot of films for Fred, and she had been working side by side with David Dakota. And we had decided that, well, you introduced me to Dave, would you like to meet Fred? And she would, I would love to. Could you really introduce me to Fred Olen Ray? I'd love to work for him. So I went ahead and introduced her to Ray and said that she really wanted to work for him. She was very anxious to get some things done, although she had interviewed for him on a couple of films already. He used her in this, and there we did. We put another epic to the making, and we did Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers.
When we first started to produce this picture, I shared a very small office. And when I say small, I mean it was one room and you had to walk through that room to get to the next room. And I shared this office with a guy named George Edwards, who was a producer of movies like Queen of Blood with Basil Rathbone and Frogs with Ray Milland. And it was really literally one room, and I had one telephone with call waiting, and people would come in and we would sit in this closet-like space on the floor, and everyone would wait their turn to use the telephone. But it was at Raleigh Studios, and it was really charming at the time. We quickly outgrew this space, but we did make Phantom Empire and Hollywood Chainsaw and a few things sitting around on the floor in this space. And this is where I met Jay Richardson. I ran an ad in a trade paper, and it was the first movie when he came back and decided he was going to pursue acting once again. This was the first film. I already knew Michelle Bauer because I had been making pictures with her for a while, and through her I met Linnea Quigley, who I thought would be good because she had sort of an innocent Goldie Hawn sort of a quality about her. And we quickly kind of threw this cast together. I mean, this movie really was just culled together from short ends of films left over from other people's stuff, and pieces of equipment and stuff that we could borrow and steal, and, you know, shooting without permits, and even the temple set at the end of the movie where the girls are fighting, the temple walls were actually made of foam rubber, and they were Aztec temple walls left over from a movie called House with William Catt, where in that film they went into a second dimension or something, and they were in some kind of Aztec tomb or something. But we would kind of go around and get all these different little bits and pieces and stuff, and these chainsaws were very heavy. They were really quite heavy, and they're very scary. I mean, we had to have a moving blade in a few shots where you'd see the blade come to a stop in front of an actor's face or something, and they were really very scary and I think dangerous to be working with. And of course, no one ever seemed to be able to get them started when you needed to get them started. But it was certainly a wild experience.
I wasn't even one of the hookers. I was playing the good girl, the sort of good girl that's looking for a friend that's head was found in a trash can. And I meet up with this detective, and there's some romance, some blood, some mysterious type things that happen. I remember a real dramatic time in the movie where Fred Olen Ray didn't think that I had rehearsed this one scene enough because there was a lot of dialogue. And so he said, "I'll give you a quarter if you get the whole thing in one take." And I, you know, being greedy, said, "Yes, I'll do it, I'll do it." And I was very nervous. And it's the scene where I'm untying Jay from the bed, and I say, "I don't have time to talk." And I go on and on and on and on and on. And I did it. And Fred even gave me the quarter. I became kind of rich overnight.
We were using real chainsaws. A lot of people have asked me if they were phony. Well, they weren't. They were real, and they were heavy. They were full of gas and oil. They were dripping fluids on us the whole time. And there was a scene with Jay where I try to start a chainsaw. For one thing, if you're not used to it, it just doesn't work. So you have somebody always starting it off the camera and handing you the chainsaw, and you have to act like you just started it, and you're revving it up in his face. And we had a real blade, and I'm coming at him with the blade, and had I slipped or fell or lost my balance, he'd be dead meat to this day. So we decided, better safe than sorry. They would take the chains off and put on a felt strip, and they would Mickey Mouse it on there and have the chainsaw running, and it vibrated so much you really couldn't see that the chain wasn't there. In fact, when the chain was on, it was a blur, so you really couldn't tell the difference. So when we have the dueling chainsaws, we were always waiting between setups for a long period of time because they had to take the chain off, they had to put the fake chain on, and for the scenes that we were actually using the chainsaws in the fight and against other people. So it was a safety thing that was in question there, but a lot of people ask if they were real. Yes, they were real. When Linnea comes out of the mummy case to do her dance of the chainsaws, she's in there with them running because she couldn't come out and very sexily pull her chainsaws up and start doing her dance. So she's in there with them idling, and the case opens, and she is just completely gassed with all this exhaust. So if she looks a little weak while she's wielding her chainsaws, it's because she was completely gone with these gas fumes. When she comes walking out, they were really running.
There was another time I almost died on Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. It was a very dangerous film, doing my own stunts and all, where I had 2 chainsaws, and before I'm going to do my famous dance of the double virgin chainsaws, I'm in the mummy's case, having 2 running chainsaws, 2 small ones, even though they were heavy. And the fumes were just horrible. And you can see in the film where when I step out, I kind of stumble because of all the fumes getting to me. And that was one of the other dangerous things that happened.
At one point toward the end of the picture, there are some girls who are part of the chainsaw cult, and they weren't actually really actresses in the film. And due to legal situations, I can't say that I actually thought they were prostitutes, but I had been told that these girls were actually streetwalkers off of Sunset Boulevard. And they came in, and we had rat beer for the night. I think it was our last night. And they drank all the rat beer before they even got to shoot their shot. They got into our coolers, and they were supposed to say, give it to him or kill him or whatever it was, but somehow or another they managed to merge those 2 lines, and the girls are they're saying kill it to him, and they're all chanting this, these ladies, and it was a wild evening where all kinds of strange and bizarre characters were floating through, and it was all shot in a little studio called Movie Tech, which was run by a guy named Lucky Ewing Brown, who those 50s aficionados will remember. He was in Giant from the Unknown, and he was the gangster who was always carving his initials in the table in The Astounding She-Monster. Now Lucky ran the studio. Lucky is still alive. He's incredibly old. He's never changed in the 20-some years that I've known him. And we shot a great portion of this film in his little studio. And the tomb, or the temple, was there, and I don't even know what all was there. The hotel rooms were there, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes we would go out, but very little movement. We very rarely strayed from where we were. And we were using Hudson sprayers for the blood. And of course, real movie blood wouldn't go through a Hudson sprayer, so we had to kind of water it down. And by the time it came out, it started looking like orange Kool-Aid, kind of hitting these girls. And I was always really disappointed in the fact that the blood didn't really look quite as realistic. Also, at one point, we went to a place called the West Side Bar. And it was a restaurant bar that was sort of owned by some people that we knew, and we used that as a bar, and we didn't have any extras. So when Michelle comes in and she looks down the bar at the people sitting there, it was every guy on the crew who wasn't holding a light or something sitting there. As you look down the line, you see the gaffer and the assistant director, and you see my own son, Chris, who was about 12 at the time. He's sitting at the end of the bar, closest to the lens, holding a martini. And I always regretted that I didn't do the one gag I wanted. The guy said, "How did you pick me out?" And Michelle says, "You're the only real man here." I wanted to cut to a table of like 8-year-olds in ties with martinis, and they would all like look over really pissed off. And I never got to do that, and it's probably just as well for the child welfare authorities.
There's a really good scene in the movie where Jay's going to take me out of there, and what he does is he has to headbutt me to render me unconscious. So we tried it a couple times, and Fred's saying, no, harder, make it look like you're really hitting her. You know, just, put your head forward. He kept showing us how to do it. And so Jay just, put his head back and came forward, and it was a real headbutt. My head was spinning, but we just kept going, didn't break character. He dragged me out of there, and that was the end of the night for that night. Thank goodness, because I had to go home and take some aspirin and some other types of drugs afterward.
When we made this picture, the idea was never for it to be anything special. I wrote an original draft. My friend Lee Langford did a polish on it and brought all of his noirish detective sort of touches to the dialogue. And we just thought we'd go out on video and we'd do a little bit of business and, on to something else. When you make 5, 6 films a year, you never think about one in particular is going to be this or that, especially when its aspirations were as low as this one. But in the years that have passed, we have traveled around the world showing this film at festivals. We did release it theatrically on the strength of our one print. We had one lousy 35mm print, and we booked it in New York, we booked it around the country. That one little print has traveled so many places. Michelle and I went to London for to the Everyman Theatre in Hampstead for some kind of film festival where we screened it there. We've screened it in Vancouver at the Bee Festival, in Toronto at the Bee Festival. We have showed it all over the world, and it's been translated into I don't know how many languages. It's been an incredible experience for a picture that was shot so quickly and so cheaply.
If you ever notice, there's a mummy case in the film where we have the temple scenes. Well, that was taken from the movie Vamp, which was a Grace Jones film. If you look real close at the mummy case, you can see it's her face. And I had had a real bad experience on a Grace Jones movie, and that's probably why I wielded my chainsaw so well. I had been on the movie Vamp, and I was cast as an extra vampire, but with a speaking role. Not much, but it was a start. And I waited approximately, I would say 12 hours in a trailer with a red wig on, waiting to go on, and they brought me cold hamburgers and French fries to eat, and I got so upset, and I don't typically do that, but I got so upset, I threw my wig down, stepped on it once, and walked out the door and went home. I didn't get established in the film, and I'm really glad. But I got very upset, and I walked. That Grace Jones movie really upset me. So when it came to my chainsaw scene in Hookers, and I saw her face on that case, I went for it all the way.
They said they were going to do a little bit of a paint job on me for the dance of the double virgin chainsaws. So they thought, well, it would take a couple hours. I said, okay. And it was kind of, you know, okay, I'm used to this sort of thing. So they started in the process of painting me with one person, putting the design in. All of a sudden, 2 hours had gone by. Then all of a sudden they were calling different people in, like, you know, the grips and the prop people to paint in the little things. It was 5 hours then. Then I ended up calling my boyfriend to come down and paint some too. So it ended up about 7 hours, and after the 7 hours I was a little bit tired of standing there, and I had to go and fight Michelle and dance, and Fred kept teasing me about doing this sexy dance with the chainsaws, and I was taking him serious, and when I had the two chainsaws I found it was really hard to dance sexy with two chainsaws. Not a lot you can do.
I get a lot of questions about the beginning scene in Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers where I pick up on Jimmy Williams, who's Bobo Hansen, I believe his name is. And I take him back to my apartment, and I cover my Elvis, and I put on my cap, and I'm dancing around the room, and they're playing an Elvis song, which I am miming. I put the ring on my finger, and the song we were using to give me something to dance to while we're taping, when in effect we didn't use that song at all. And Fred, Olen, Ray had to go and find someone, Elvis sound-alike, to use for that particular scene. A lot of people ask me, well, how come you're doing this with the ring on your finger when the song that's playing has nothing to do with anything? Well, that explains it. I took it upon myself to try and be creative, to no avail.
On TV, they've shown that clip where I'm dancing with the chainsaws a million times, and, you know, Entertainment Tonight, E, and nobody knows that I'm actually nude under that paint, and they just show it like I've got clothes on because it kind of looks like an outfit, but actually I'm nude. I can say that now. It's really strange, but I think Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers has had an unbelievable lasting impression on people for some reason. There's something in it, I guess, that just like maybe Forrest Gump or something kind of stays on people's minds. You know, stupid is as stupid does. You know, the saying, the dance of the double virgin chainsaws. People are saying things like that everywhere. There's pictures of me in my makeup, and pictures of Michelle with her chainsaw, the fighting, and people just always in England and in the United States want to talk about Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. They want the movie. They want to see it. They want to see the Elvis painting sprayed with blood. And for some reason, that movie has become like a cult classic. I think the actors, the director, the way that it was shot, the way the moon was in the sky, and the short time we did it. I don't know. That's a question I keep asking myself too. I don't know, but I think all those things together. And probably, probably the chainsaws. Probably everybody's phallic fascination with chainsaws.
I think the person who doesn't give himself any credit is Fred Ray, because he tends to put a lot of his own personality in these things, which brings them to life, and he creates them in such a way that the people are just demanding more of him, and his personality is what you're seeing in these films. And I think you should do a sequel, so I think you should write him at American Independent and tell him to do so.
There was a magazine last year, Maxim magazine. I was very, very thrilled to discover that they had put out an issue in which they listed the 50 coolest B movies of all time, and we were number 4. We were the number 4 top coolest B film of all time, and outranking Escape from New York and some other very notable pictures. So I was very jazzed by that. And at the same time, we were a little stunned at one point when the British government issued a report of what the top 10 worst offenders were in motion pictures in England, films that were most likely to cause a viewer to commit an act of violence. And we were number 7 or 8. And which I laughed, because this movie was a comedy. There wasn't anything serious about this film at all. In fact, this film was a message about safe sex. When I came to Los Angeles from Florida, being the young innocent that I was, I saw these sex papers, and there were all these ads in these papers. You might wonder why I was looking at them, but still. And you could call people from these classifieds. I guess they would come to your house. And I said, you know, you never know when you call a classified ad that the person who comes over to see you may be some kind of axe-wielding maniac. How do you know? And so this was kind of the message of Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers was, be careful, you know, who you find yourself naked in a room with. They may have a chainsaw or something in their dresser drawer. And I mean, it's a very serious and it's a real concern. I think everybody should take this to heart. Coming off of the British report, which tried to paint us as some kind of deviant product in manipulating people's minds, I would like to point out the fact that it's illegal in the UK to use the word chainsaw in the title of a movie. And to that end, when they distributed the film there, they produced these great little chainsaws, but they're not allowed to use the word chainsaw, so it's got a picture. It's got a picture of a chainsaw here instead of the word, because that word is verboten in the UK in the title of a movie. Now that's repressed. You talk about repressed, that's repressed. So in the UK it's called Hollywood Picture of a Chainsaw, Hookers. When all is said and done, it's probably taken me more time and more effort and more care to put together this special edition of Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers than it ever did to make the original film. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time.